Welcome, current and potential measure authoring tool users. My name is Chandra Bartleman. I am the Health Informatics Service Coordinator for the Measure Authoring Tool Development Team. Today we are reviewing the updates to the MAT to be included in the release of MAT version 4.3.0. The upcoming release includes updates to reflect the most recent version of the Quality Data Model, QDM version 4.2. Your lines will be muted for the duration of the presentation and then unmuted to allow for questions at the end. Instructions for submitting questions will be provided at the beginning of the question and answer session. During the webinar, we will present the MAT version 4.3.0 updates, view a live demonstration of the MAT, outline steps for creating a successful measure package following the release, summarize the MAT updates, and conclude the webinar with a 10 to 15 minute question and answer session. You are encouraged to submit questions as we go by using the chat feature, and we will address those questions as time permits during the Q&A session. MAT development team members will be present to answer your questions. The MAT version 4.3.0 release date is Tuesday, October 6, 2015. As with previous releases, MAT users will receive an email notification prior to the release with details about downtime. As always, the MAT complies with the best practices related to security for online applications. A few minor changes with login attempts and passwords are implemented related to ensuring a secure application. The message received by MAT users when an invalid username or password is entered is updated. The message now reads, "Invalid username and or password. MAT accounts are locked after 3 invalid login attempts. You will not receive a message indicating your account has been locked as in the current version of the tool. If you continue to receive this message after 3 attempts, your account is locked, and you will be required to contact the MAT Help Desk." An additional update prevents MAT users from using one of their last 6 passwords when creating a new password. 2 changes are made to the measure library. Share and clone icons have always been disabled if you are not the measure owner. With the updated version of the MAT, the disabled share and clone icons are gray, and active share and clone icons appear in color, as pictured here. The next change in the measure library is related to the export icons. When applicable, the MAT coordinates releases to coincide with QDM updates. The MAT version 3 measure packages contain measure logic using the QDM prior to the QDM version 4. MAT version 4 includes packages using the QDM version 4 through 4.1.2, and the upcoming MAT version 4.3 uses the most recent QDM version 4.2. The MAT version 3 measure packages are generated for any measure last packaged before July 25, 2014. MAT version 4 measure packages are generated for any measure last package between July 25, 2014 and before the October 6, 2015 release. MAT version 4.3 measure packages are generated for any measure packaged after October 6, 2015 release. MAT version 3 measure packages will have a gray icon, and the tooltip will say, "Click to export MAT v3 as pictured here." MAT version 4 measure packages will have a yellow icon, and the tooltip will say, "Click to export MAT v4. MAT version 4.3 measure packages will have a yellow icon, and the tooltip will say, "Click to export MAT v4.3. If you remember one thing about this segment of the presentation, it should be that after you successfully package a measure following the release of the MAT version 4.3 on October 6, 2015, your measure package will reflect the most recent Quality Data Model publication, version 4.2. The QDM Elements page of the tool is updated to match the QDM version 4.2. We will review those changes now. The three data types, diagnosis active, diagnosis resolved, and diagnosis inactive, are replaced with one data type, diagnosis. The data type diagnosis family history is replaced with the data type family history. The three data types, symptom active, symptom assessed, and symptom resolved, are replaced with one data type named symptom. The data type symptom inactive is being retired. 4 additional new immunization data types are added: immunization administered, immunization allergy, immunization intolerance, and immunization order. If a deprecated or retired data type is used in an applied element as pictured here, the validation of the applied QDM element will fail. You see a yellow caution icon and the deprecated data type in red text after the Update from VSAC button is selected. After a non-user-defined QDM element or attribute is added to the Applied QDM Elements list, it is identified as a grouping or extensional value set. If the value set applied was a grouping, a G in parentheses is displayed after the value set name. An extensional value set will have an E in parentheses behind the value set name. The clause workspace includes updated attribute lists based on an updated QDM and additional validations to guide clause logic creation. The new data type, diagnosis, has the following available attributes: abatement date time, anatomical location site, onset date time, severity, health record field, source, and recorder. The new data type, family history, has the following available attributes: onset age, recorded date time, which replaces start date time and stop date time, relationship, health record field, source, and recorder. The new data type, symptom, has the following available attributes: abatement date time, onset date time, severity, health record field, source, and recorder. Diagnosis and principal diagnosis are added attributes for the data type encounter performed. Reference range high and reference range low are added attributes for the data type laboratory test performed. The attributes patient preference and provider preference are removed for all data types. Negation rationale is removed from inappropriate data types. Refer to the most recent publication of the quality data model to see which data types retain the attribute negation rationale. MAT version 4.3 contains all allowable data types and attributes based on the most recent QDM publication. The most recent QDM publication is located at ecqi.healthit.gov. Additional validations are added to the clause workspace to guide you through constructing valid measure logic. Nearly every measure has one or more of the re-specified data types. In this example, the data type diagnosis active is used in the measure logic. Recall that the diagnosis active data type is replaced with the data type diagnosis. Invalid data types applied to existing measure logic display in red when a validation of the clause is performed on clause workspace. MAT users will be required to re-specify their existing logic and use new data types to complete their measure logic. It's important to note if an invalid data type is used in the measure logic, attempts to package a measure containing those segments of logic will fail. When an existing clause using attributes which have been removed from the updated QDM is validated, validation fails. The QDM element will appear in red. The logic statement will need to be edited using the updated QDM. In this example, notice the tooltip shows that the attribute added to the applied QDM element, ADHD medication adverse effects, contains the removed attribute, negation rationale. It is important to understand the cascading effects of having an invalid attribute or data type in your clause logic. An invalid attribute or data type used in a clause in clause workspace will cause a clause workspace validation to fail. If that clause is used anywhere in population workspace, the validation of the measure logic in population workspace fails. The clause appears in red, and a validation error message displays that says measure logic is incorrect, invalid clause logic. Please validate clause logic on clause workspace. If the population containing the clause with invalid logic is included in the measure package, the attempt to create a measure package fails, and a packaging error message displays that says unable to create measure package. Please validate your measure logic in both population workspace and clause workspace. Because of the cascading effect of using a clause with invalid logic in your measure, it is best practice to perform a validation of your clause logic prior to applying it to the population workspace, or attempting to create a measure package on the measure packager page. If a clause is named but no logic is added, that clause will fail validation. This validation prevents MAT users from including a clause containing no logic in the measure package. The left-hand side QDM element applied to a satisfies all or satisfies any clause may not contain an attribute. Validation of the clause logic fails in the clause workspace as pictured here. The validation error message reads, measure logic is incomplete. Satisfies all and satisfies any left-hand side QDM element may not contain attributes. The MAT prevents users from creating measure logic without required information where applicable. After this release, users are prevented from adding a comparison to a timing that does not contain both a quantity and a unit. In this example, there is a quantity entered, but a unit has not been selected. Therefore, the user is prevented from completing this action until the desired unit is selected. Additional validations are implemented on the population workspace. Population workspace validation fails if an applied clause contains an invalid attribute, an applied clause contains an invalid data type, or the applied clause contains no logic. In the example displayed here, the clause is deemed invalid due to the invalid use of the attribute negation rationale. Therefore, validation fails on the population workspace, and you're directed to return to clause workspace to correct your measure logic. The same message appears in population workspace for all three scenarios. Population workspace validation fails if the top-level AND does not contain at least one logical operator or clause, and the terminal logical operator under the top-level logical operator does not contain at least one clause. In the example to the left, the top-level AND has two child nodes, sample clause A and the terminal logical operator AND. The terminal logical operator AND has three children, sample clause B, the terminal logical operator and sample clause C. The last terminal logical operator does not contain at least one clause. Therefore, the population logic is incorrect. Additional validations are added to the measure packager page. When Create Measure Package or Create Package and Export are selected, a final validation of the included measure logic and populations is performed. If validation fails, the measure packaging attempt fails. The validations added to this final check include use of invalid data types and attributes, use of clauses with no logic, and An incomplete population where a terminological operator is added, but without a clause is a child node. The message is the same regardless of the reason for failed package. The message reads, unable to create measure package. Please validate your measure logic in both population workspace and clause workspace. Next, we will review the updates to the export files. The measure package files use an informative naming convention to indicate if the measure package is a MAT version 4.3, version 4.0, or version 3.0 measure package. The example pictured here is a bulk measure package and contains 3 measure packages. The first file name includes v4.3.0, which indicates that this measure has been packaged since October 6, 2015 release, and is a MAT version 4.3 measure package. The second file includes v4, which indicates this measure was packaged prior to October 6, 2015 release, but after the July 25, 2014 release, and is a MAT version 4 measure package. The third file includes v3, which indicates this measure was packaged prior to July 25, 2014. The HTML, Simple XML, and HTML files are updated to include the new data types and attributes added with the implementation of QDM version 4.2. I will now provide you with a live demonstration of the measure authoring tool. This is a training environment. The measures we will be viewing today are not intended for publication. They are sample measures used for the sole purpose of demonstrating the measure authoring tool functionality. You will notice the login message has changed when an incorrect password or user ID is entered. It now says, invalid username and/or password. MAT accounts are locked after 3 invalid login attempts. Your MAT account locked after 3 failed login attempts, but the message will remain unchanged. At this time, I will enter my MAT credentials to log into the MAT. After successfully logging into the MAT, I enter my UMLS credentials. This action allows me to utilize the VSAC API and retrieve the VSAC value set data. We will begin our demonstration today by looking at the measure library. The clone and share icons are gray when disabled and display color when active. Because I own all the measures in my measures list, the edit and share icons appear in color. Only the measure owner may share or clone a measure. If I am not the owner of the measure, the share and clone icons appear in gray and are not clickable. To show this, I will perform a search of all measures. Here is a list of all measures. Notice the measures listed that I do not own display a non-clickable gray icon. The export icon in the last column of the measure list is also updated. The tooltip for the export icon is updated to reflect the MAT version being exported. Measures packaged before July 25, 2014 have a gray icon, and the tooltip reads MAT v3. Measures packaged after July 25, 2014 have a yellow icon, and the tooltip identifies if the export is a MAT version 4 or a MAT version 4.3 measure package. The MAT version 4 measure packages are packaged between July 25th and October 6, 2015. The MAT version 3 measure packages are packaged after the October 6, 2015 release. The file name used in the zip file will identify if the measure is a MAT version 3, 4, or 4.3 measure package. For example, I'm creating a bulk export that contains a MAT v3 MAT v4, and a MAT v4.3 measure package by clicking on the checkboxes to the right of the export icons. The zip file containing these three measures uses a naming convention that specifies which MAT version the measure package represents: version 3, version 4, and version 4.3. V3 represents the MAT version 3 measure package, V4 represents the MAT version 4 measure package, and V4_3 represents the MAT version 4.3 measure package. As a reminder, this version number does not represent the measure version number, but rather the MAT version used to create the measure package. To take a closer look at the changes made to the different pages of the measure composer, I will select the MAT version 4.3.0 training measure, session B. After selecting the measure from the measure library, I'm redirected to the measure details page. There are no changes made to the measure details page during this release. Several updates are made to the QDM Elements page to implement the updated QDM. If we look at the options available in the data type drop-down box, you will see the addition of the new data types. The new data types added with this release are diagnosis, family history, immunization administered, immunization allergy, immunization intolerance, immunization order, and symptoms. You will also see that the value sets used to create QDM elements and attributes in the Applied QDM element list now identify if a grouping or extensional value set was used. An E in parentheses displays after the name of the extensional value set, and G in parentheses displays after the name of the grouping value set. The contents of the Applied QDM Elements list is validated when you select the Update from VSAC button at the bottom of the QDM Elements page. Before proceeding with a validation of the QDM element list, verify you have an active connection to the VSAC API by confirming the presence of a green dot in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. After the update from the VSAC is performed, the items added to the Applied QDM Elements table are validated. Red text and caution icons indicate if an invalid OID or data type are applied. The data types removed with the most recent QDM update now appear in red text in the Applied QDM Elements list. Once you've identified the use of an invalid data type, you can use your edit functions to update your applied attribute or QDM element. For example, the data type diagnosis active is no longer valid. Therefore, I can select the pencil icon to modify this applied element and apply an available data type. When editing the items in the QDM Elements table, remember, an attribute cannot be edited to anything but an attribute. In other words, I cannot select attribute when modifying a QDM element. Likewise, I cannot select a data type when modifying an attribute. Next, we will review the updates to the clause workspace. The clause workspace is updated again to reflect the changes and additions included in the QDM version 4.2. To begin, let us look at the attributes available for the new data types. The attributes available for the data type diagnosis are abatement date time, anatomical location site, onset date time, severity, health record field, source, and recorder. The attributes available for the data type family history are onset age, recorded date time, relationship, health record field, source, and recorder. The attributes available for the data type symptom are abatement date time, onset date time, severity, health record field, source, and recorder. The attributes available for the data type immunization administered are dose, negation rationale, reason, route, start date time, stop date time, health record field, source, and recorder. The attributes available for the data type immunization allergy are reaction, start date time, stop date time, health record field, source and recorder. The attributes available for the data type immunization intolerance are reaction, start date time, stop date time, health record field, source and recorder. The attributes available for the data type immunization order are active date time, dose, negation rationale, reason, route, sign date time, start date time, stop date time, health record field, source and recorder. Two existing data types have added attributes. The attributes diagnosis and principal diagnosis are added for the data type encounter performed. The attributes reference range high and reference range low are added for the data type laboratory test performed. Negation rationale is removed as an available option from inappropriate data types, and the attributes patient preference and provider preference are removed as available options for all data types. At this time, we will now show some of the validations added to the clause workspace with the version 4.3.0 release. When existing clauses contain invalid attributes or data types, the validation fails. For example, if we look at the clause named diagnosis _ invalid data type and validate the clause, because the invalid diagnosis data types are used, the validation fails. The QDM elements using invalid data types appear in red text. Measure logic containing these invalid data types will need to be updated using the updated QDM. Next, if a clause contains no logic, validation fails, and you see the message, measure logic is incomplete. Clause must contain logic. The third validation we will review occurs when an attribute is added to the left-hand side QDM element and it satisfies all or satisfies any segment of logic. Validation fails if an attribute is applied. For example, this satisfies all clause contains an attribute on the left-hand side QDM element. The error message reads, satisfies all, and satisfies any left-hand side QDM element may not contain attributes. If I remove the attribute, the invalid data types still appear in red, but the attribute message is resolved. MAT users are required to enter both quantity and units when adding a comparison to a timing. In this example, if I attempt to add a comparison to the timing starts before end of, such as equal to, and enter a quantity but not a unit, I am prevented from completing this action, and I'm reminded to add a unit. You are prevented from adding a comparison until both a quantity and a unit are entered. Changes to the QDM implemented during this release impacts most, if not all, existing measures in the MAT tool. At this time, I will show one example of a clause using invalid data type being updated using the updated QDM version 4.2. I am going to revisit the clause diagnosis invalid data type. Here you are seeing the clause as it existed prior to the release of the QDM version 4.2. Here you see the same clause as it appears in the human readable. Using the new data type diagnosis, this clause can be consolidated. The new clause might look like this. Diagnosis, all cancer, starts before end of measurement period. To update this clause, I would complete the following actions. Delete the right-hand side measurement period and the left-hand side union of the now invalid data types, and then add the new left-hand side QDM element, all cancer diagnosis, and add the right-hand side measurement period. Validate the updated clause, and then save changes. To verify the changes appear in the human readable as expected, I can use the View Human Readable option. Next, we will review the population workspace. Clause workspace validations are carried over to the population workspace. If you apply a clause with no logic, validation fails. The message displayed is invalid clause logic. Please validate clause logic on clause workspace. If you apply a clause which uses an invalid data type or a deprecated attribute, validation fails. In this scenario, where a clause with an invalid data type is added, the message reads, again, measure logic is incorrect, invalid clause logic, please validate clause logic on clause workspace. There is one final validation to review. A terminological operator must contain a clause. For example, if a terminological operator, such as AND, is added to the top level and a clause such as union new data types, then the population workspace is validated, the validation fails. The message will read, measure logic incorrect. Any logical operator under a top-level logical operator must contain at least one logical operator or clause. Any terminal logical operator under a top-level logical operator must contain at least one clause. To remedy this error message, either a clause needs to be added to the terminal logical operator or the terminal logical operator should be removed. Now the validation is successful. Validations are added throughout the measure authoring tool as you enter your measure logic to ensure the content of the export files align with HQMS and QDM implementation guidelines. At this time, I will provide guidance for creating a successful measure package following the MAT version 4.3 release. The following guidance will help a measure authoring tool user create a successful measure package. The first step in creating a successful measure package will be to review the updated QDM version 4.2, which is posted to the ECQI healthit.gov/QDM, and consider the impacts to your existing measure logic. Next, view impacted measures beginning with the QDM Elements page. On the QDM Elements page, validate the Applied QDM Element list. Use the Edit tool to modify Applied QDM Elements and attributes if applicable, and add additional QDM elements and/or attributes as necessary. After completing your desired changes on the QDM Elements page, validate impacted clauses in the clause workspace. If applicable, use the clause workspace edit features to update measure logic or add new clauses. Verify that all clauses in the clause library contain measure logic. Next, you can advance to the population workspace and perform a validation of the population workspace. Remove invalid clauses if applicable, and add newly constructed clauses as necessary. Remember that individual clauses may be edited in the clause workspace. Finally, verify the terminal logical operators contain at least one clause when used in the population workspace. When creating your measure package on the Measure Packager page, update your measure groupings as necessary and repackage your updated measure. You will receive the displayed success message, which confirms you have successfully updated your measure and created a MAT version 4.3.0 measure package. Before the Q&A session, let's quickly review the updates presented today. In the measure library, the clone and share icons appear gray if they're disabled, and the export icon in the last column are updated to identify which MAT version is being used to generate the measure package, MAT version 3, MAT version 4, or MAT version 4.3. The data type drop-down box on the QDM Elements page is updated to match the most recent QDM. When the QDM list is validated, removed data types will appear in red and are identified as invalid. In addition, the value set used to build a QDM element or attribute will be identified in the QDM Elements list as a grouping or extensional value set. Clause Workspace has new validations added to identify invalid data types and attributes used in measure logic. The available attributes for Applied QDM Elements are updated and reflect the QDM version 4.2. An additional validation is added to identify clauses containing no logic as invalid. And in the Clause Workspace, users are prevented from adding an attribute to a left-hand side QDM element when satisfies all or satisfies any is used. And users are prevented from adding a comparison to a timing that does not contain both the quantity and unit. Performing a validation in the Population Workspace also identifies clauses with invalid attributes and data types. In addition, terminological operators must contain at least one clause, and a validation error message is produced if these criteria are not met. The measure packager performs a comprehensive validation of the included measure logic when create measure package or create measure package and export are selected. The measure package fails if the measure logic includes any of the removed data types or attributes, clauses without logic, and terminal operators without at least one clause. The HTML, Simple XML, and HQMS files are updated to reflect the updated QDM version 4.2. The auto-generated file name for measure packages identifies a measure package as a MAT version 3, MAT version 4, or MAT version 4.3. A number of resources continue to be available to you as a MAT user. The MAT website provides helpful hints and links to additional resources. The updated user guide and release notes are posted to the website following the MAT version 4.3 release. Questions pertaining to how to re-specify existing measure logic using the new QDM version 4.2 can be submitted using the QDM issue tracker at jira.oncprojecttracking.org/browse/QDM, or you may contact the MAT support team, who continue to be available for ongoing measure authoring tool support. The new QDM version 4.2 publication is posted as of Monday, August 31st, 2015 at ecqi.healthit.gov. And a recording of today's presentation will be made available on the MAT website. You will receive an email notification when the recorded webinar is available for viewing. You are also encouraged to access the HQMS and QDM-based HQMS implementation guides located at www.hl7.org. As a reminder, the MAT version 4.3.0 is scheduled to be released on Tuesday, October 6, 2015. We would now like to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions regarding the changes. Members of the Measure Authoring Tool Development Team are standing by to assist in answering your questions. To ask a question, select #6 on your phone, and please state your first and last name before asking the question. Again, if you have an additional question, please select #6 on your phone, state your first and last name. You may also use the chat feature if you'd like to submit a question in that manner. Thank you for your attendance and participation in the question and answer session. Please submit unanswered questions to the Measure Authoring Tool Help Desk by completing the Contact Us form located on the Contact Us page of the public website, or you may call 1-800-673-0655. All MAT users will be notified by email when the presentation is available for view on YouTube. This marks the conclusion of today's webinar. Thank you for your participation.